Hi, welcome to Gridiron Gurus for the Kennebec Journal and Morning Sentinel. I'm Travis Lazarczyk alongside Drew Bonifant. Drew, how you doing?
Doing great. How are you?
I am not bad. Today our guest is Madison head coach Scott Franzose. Scott, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Big win for your team last week against Oak Hill. Just kind of talking about what that does to set the tone for the second half of the season for you guys.
Yeah, big rebound win. You know, we had a tough one with Lisbon. Might have been a little bit deceiving. You know, ended up 30-8. It was actually a 16-8 ball game. 7 minutes left. Wheels kind of went in four different directions. You know, but I felt that was kind of a little bit of a turning point. You know, we were coming off a couple of good wins in Class C, Waterville, and Belfast. So the Lisbon game, I felt that we started seeing a turning point where we were getting a little bit more consistency. I think last week we started to put more of that together. You know, that consistency, you know, maintaining drives. Our offense has been moving the ball well, just not finishing. So we saw more of that last week. We maintained drives, which is good. We like to be a big play team, but we like to also show that we can control the ball. Team defense has been good. So, yeah, you know, right now in a conference where everybody's looking for separation, you know, you got the two top teams undefeated. Everybody else is battling for that one game here, one game there for positioning. So obviously huge, you know, with that win.
Yeah. It looks like a lot of guys who started the season in new positions for you are starting to get comfortable in those new roles.
Yes. You know, guys like Mike Melanson, he was a receiver. He stepped up big last year as a junior. He was an outside flanker for us, great stock blocker. He stepped into the backfield and filled a role. Josh Savage, who's a senior, you know, always been a talented player. Now expecting more of him, both sides of the ball. So, yeah, I think they're starting to settle in. They're getting used to our offense. You know, our offense isn't really any different than it has been in past seasons with that two-back system. Still run a lot of, you know, run-first spread type of offense, a little more RPO-based and three-prong attack. But they're getting more and more comfortable. Young guys stepping up as well. So they're creating depth there and, you know, really challenging and creating some competition. So I think, again, that consistency is coming with guys getting more comfortable in their role within the systems.
Yeah, talk about the physical challenge of playing that game too, because I talked to Stacey Doucette, the Oak Hill coach, who was on the losing end of that game, and he was saying, you know, this is a game that goes, you know, he wasn't saying this, but with the game that was going, you know, over 2 hours long, you know, into the night, long game, a lot of points late. And what Stacey was saying was, you know, I like the effort we had. It was just tough to keep kids from being burned out towards the end of the fourth quarter. And was that something that you were kind of seeing, that physical toll kicking in the fourth quarter when you get a game going that long, that many points and everything?
Yeah, I think when you're in the heat of the moment, you know, in the heat of battle, you don't realize it afterward. And holy smokes, that was a long game. You know, it just seemed like I looked at the film and I think we had like 170 clips. So there was just a lot of plays on both sides of the ball. So yeah, it takes its toll. You know, coincidentally, the week before with Lisbon, I felt was one of our biggest physical tests. You know, I thought we did a good job keeping them in check, holding their run game in check, playing very physical along the line of scrimmage, things that we're looking to improve on and find that consistency I talked about. So we were kind of tested the week before. In a game like that, I was even more impressed with our guys. Like Stacey said, that was a physical test on both sides for everybody. So, yeah, I mean, it can take your toll. I think this is the point in the season where you got to start. It's a slippery slope because now we're past the halfway point. This is where you don't want to call them the biggest games that you play. They're all big. But now it's crunch time. So, you know, we've got to be able to play in those types of games that are physical, that are long, that, you know, test guys with that Ironman football type stuff.
They're certainly the games with the most at stake. I mean, you know,
sure.
you might play, you know, Lisbon and Wells could be a week one matchup. You know, those might be the two top teams in the region, but there's still time to recover for both teams with losses. And this is where that seeding position starts to matter most. So, I mean, does it feel like the players start to either just dial in it a little more at this time of year, or do you see the players pretty much approach these games the same way that they do in September in September in the early part of this month?
Well, I think with us, I think in general, theoretically, yeah, most teams are going to approach them a little bit differently because, you know, I think you hit it on the head. Every game is big, obviously, and we can give the coach speak all we want, but now they do become more important. And you know, but we are running out of running out of time, all of us, for that separation. But when it comes down to, you know, the team in Madison, so theoretically I agree with that. Our team this year is a little bit of a different dynamic that I haven't dealt with in a while. You know, we because I think we knew that we were going to be young in areas. We have a great senior class that we're trying to continue with great leaders there. You know, our senior captains, Brad Peters, Eric Westcott, Jacob Meter, Lucas Murray. And then some guys that are just starting to settle into roles like we talked about, they haven't had those reps. They played behind, whether they're the Chase Malloys or the Evan Besses and Sean Whalens and all of those guys. The young guys are stepping up more and more. So I think that's the different dynamic. I think now we're at a point in Madison where we're settling in and we're feeling like we're building identity. So, like I said, maybe, I don't know if that made any sense, but a little bit different for us because we have these young guys and these seniors kind of competing and challenging. And that's good for everybody because the seniors are starting to step up more, and now we have young guys that are becoming battle-tested, and they're ready to step up for us as well.
Wells and Lisbon have kind of separated themselves from the rest of your league, but there's right now 4 teams that are 3-2. Yourselves, Mountain Valley, Winthrop, Monmouth, Halldale, and Spruce Mountain. You play those other 3 teams for these final regular season games. Kind of break down how things need to go for you guys against these opponents, starting with Mountain Valley this weekend.
Well, hopefully, we keep the ball rolling. We get back on a winning streak here. I think it was we're still giving up big plays. That's something that, and I'm a defensive backs coach as well. So don't interview any of my defensive backs this week because they're, I'm tough on them. But we're doing well. Winning first down. We're doing well. Putting them in disadvantageous down and distance, and then 3rd and 9, we're giving up big plays, things like that. So hopefully, we're finding more balance there. But these games coming up, like with Mountain Valley, I think the separation is going to. We're so close. I feel when you look at these, all of us, talent-wise, potential-wise, we knew this conference was going to be. So it's funny because we talked last year how competitive we thought it would be. I feel it's more competitive this year, even though Wells and Lisbon have obviously separated themselves now. With other than the loss last week, Wells is now sitting on top undefeated. There's a lot of parity there. And Mountain Valley, I think we have teams coming up in all 3 of these opponents, Winthrop and Spruce Mountain included, where they're dynamic. I look at them, obviously we're looking at Mountain Valley more than anybody this week, but I've seen Spruce Mountain, and they can play in space, they can play physical, they have athletes. So, it's kind of, I know it's cliche, but you just got to take it 1 week at a time because every single week is going to count more than ever. I think it's going to be nip and tuck, that there might be a win here and then, a team, it's just everything is so much up in the air. I think it's a lot of 50-50 on the way out. So just kind of staying, focused on your opponent and let's take care of Mountain Valley this week. That's our goal.
You've seen both Wells and Lisbon. What are those 2 teams doing right now that have kind of separated them from the rest of you guys?
I think just consistency. Again, I don't want to be cliche or sound redundant. It's just, I believe that if you look at a Wells team that obviously is a very talented team, I say it year in and year out, not just because wing T teams are, more typically a little bit more system, but they have great athletes, great coaching, they're fundamental. They don't miss assignments, Lisbon, I think, is doing the same thing, and they're doing it on both sides of the ball. So, again, when you take a Lisbon team, I felt that we matched up very well with, I thought, a tremendous job of shutting down their run game. We gave up those big plays, and that became the difference. You don't see that out of Lisbon and Wells. I think that's what's separating them right now. They're playing very fundamental. The other thing is they don't blink. I noticed that about Lisbon is we didn't have them on the schedule last year. So this is the first time that, Coach Cates and I have had a chance to go head-to-head and see these guys. And, they're a class act across the board, but they don't flinch. When they're down or they have their 3 and outs or they're not moving the ball, they keep coming at you. You don't see, they just stay focused on what they need to do. And you take any team, especially talented teams like Wells and Lisbon, they do those things, they're going to separate themselves pretty quickly.
Do you see much of a difference between Coach Cates' style or the Lisbon style under Coach Cates and what they were doing under Moynihan up until, 2016 was his last year?
Yeah.
That team went to the championship game in his last year, and this year's team is obviously on his path to being just that competitive. Is it mostly the same thing that they're doing versus what they were doing under Moynihan, or do you see some differences at all in how they scheme and how they play?
Well, I'd love to be able to answer that. The thing is, this is the first time we've seen Lisbon in quite some time.
You mean the move from last season?
Yeah, Coach Moynihan, legend. Obviously Lisbon has had some very strong teams in the past. I believe they were more power based. They were more high, from what I remember. I like it. It's a single wing variation that they run there. It's a lot of Q runs with Lucas Francis, but they're adding screen, and I can say adding. I'm obviously assuming. But they have a lot of quick screen game. They like to attack the edges. They do a good job protecting their run game. it's similar to what we do, different formations, but same type of philosophy is protect the run game with the screen game. So I think those things they might be doing a little bit differently, and they do it well. Lucas is a good runner inside. They have good athletes inside of the box, but they'll kind of run a tray formation with a wing where they can protect, run, and throw the screen outside. So they do some dynamic things out of that offense.
Okay, let's move on to an issue that kind of is a little different that happened in Maine high school football this week. Scarborough is scheduled to play Massapequa on their homecoming game on Friday night. Massapequa had an outbreak of hand, foot, and mouth disease at the school, so rather than try to risk possibly passing that on to the Scarborough community, they elected to just cancel the game. As of right now, both teams will go through the regular season with just the 7 games in the Heel Point standings, and they'll configure it that way, unless it turns out where the 8th game would affect where Scarborough ends up in the standings, and then it will be counted in as a Massapequa forfeit and Scarborough win. I'll ask both of you guys, do you feel like the football committee for the MPA is handling this the correct way, or could they just come out and give Scarborough the win now?
Okay, yeah. If you make that the alternative, then maybe not. I do think that this is the right decision in terms of the automatic win angle, or that being on the table here, because it was Massapequa. It was going to be a home game for Massapequa, so it wouldn't make sense.
Actually, it's going to be a home game for Scarborough.
It's going to be a home game for Scarborough. Yeah. But I mean, when you look at it, and how that game likely would have shaken out, it's if you were to play it out, it's almost certainly going to be a Scarborough win with all things considered.
Would have been the upset of the year if Massapequa won that game.
So opening up a situation where Scarborough may have been on the downside, or getting the disadvantage from not having the game play out would have been a tough way to shake it. So I'm good with the automatic win if it comes to that being an option. But Coach, I'm not sure if you look at it the same way.
No, I mean, I understand. That's a tough situation for all, but I can understand the automatic win. Just unfortunate that the entire thing transpired this way, but yeah.
Have you ever been involved in anything where illness or something, not just, where you just don't have enough bodies to play because of injuries in a small roster, but where like an illness outbreak has affected the chance to compete?
Well, it's not on the football side. In baseball, I believe it was about 3 years ago, and I think it was Winthrop, hand, foot, and mouth. Same type of thing. It was just, an epidemic through the school, and we just had to move a baseball game, and it was close to the playoffs, but that's kind of easy to do with baseball, as long as you're within the season. It's not this, football, you really probably only want to play 1 game a week.
Yeah.
So you can't really move it to a Tuesday before your next Friday game, but that's the only time we've ever been involved in that.
Okay. Let's look at a couple of the big games this weekend. And when I say a couple, I mean there's at least a half a dozen here on our list. Drew, we'll start with a couple games in Class D South that could also affect how you guys end up in the standings. We got Winthrop Monmouth playing Lisbon and Poland playing Oak Hill.
Yeah, that Winthrop Monmouth Lisbon game, we've been kind of hitting on that with the start of the show so far today, but I think that could be an intriguing matchup because Lisbon has had some moments where they looked a little vulnerable this season. They lost to Wells by more than Winthrop Monmouth lost to Wells, and that might be a very shaky thing to base the matchup on. But it feels like a game where, and I saw Winthrop Monmouth last week. They have some talented players on that offense. Keegan Choate is the real deal at quarterback. We've talked about him before. But he's such a shifty runner. He throws. He's a confident passer. Can throw all distances of the field. It just feels like the sort of game where Winthrop Monmouth Halldale has to make sure that they're consistent. You can't just be like a few good plays, but then you get that run for a loss of 6 that gets blown up, and then that blows up the whole drive. You have to keep attacking, and because the margin of error is certainly shorter for Lisbon than it is for the Ramblers coming in. But it does feel like a game where Winthrop Monmouth can be competitive, and I keep forgetting to throw Halldale in there. Winthrop Monmouth Halldale.
We apologize to Halldale.
Yeah, and then the other one, Poland and Oak Hill. 2 and 3 teams, a chance to get right back into the race, and a chance to have your work cut out for you. All teams make the playoffs, so it's not like we're looking at a team getting bounced here. But you play with possibly having to face that Lisbon or Wells later on. So
Sure.
Some valuable seeding on hand in that game.
Coach, Poland is not on your schedule, but do you know anything about them?
I don't actually. I was talking to Coach Doucette last week. They were looking to get some film on them. I haven't seen them. I mean, I've heard good things. That obviously, if you look at the scores and the results, 2 solid wins this season. They're putting up points. It seems like they're having some good success there. But I don't know a lot about them. Oak Hill, I think. It sounds like maybe they're 2 teams that, Oak Hill with the rostering kid, and he's talked about the real deal. Smart kid, great passer. I think that their spread game and their wide open pass game is only going to get better. So that sounds like potentially it might be a shootout. From what I've seen or heard, I should say.
Okay. In the Pine Tree Conference Class B, a big game is Lawrence hosting Brunswick on Friday night. Lawrence coming off a big come-from-behind win over rival Winslow. They were down 14-0 going into the fourth quarter. Hadn't really done much in the way of moving the ball, and then put together 2 scoring drives, and then a great drive at the end of the game, getting the ball back with just over a minute left and marching down, and Zach Nickerson making a 35-yard field goal as time expires to give them the 17-14 win. Kickers like that are rare in high school. I think, if you have one, it's a weapon you'd love to be able to use in that kind of situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Wish we had one.
Yeah.
I think we had Matt Gilly from Waterville talk about the importance of special teams and how much that weighs. And we talked about the kicker Oak Hill has. Liam Rodriguez is a guy who, Doucette has said he's not just our extra point kicker. He's a field goal kicker. He's somebody that we're confident trotting on to try 30-yard kicks and everything. So it's definitely something good to have in your back pocket for sure.
And I think most of us can find an athlete. We have one, Jacob Meter, one of our senior captains, who has an outstanding leg, and we rep it every week. He can hit anywhere from 35 to 40-yard field goals. Then that C word comes down again, consistency. You got to put 11 on 11 in a big situation. But to have somebody that can do that, come out and be that true field goal kicker, that's a weapon. I think a lot of high school teams would like to have consistency like that.
In Class C North, a couple games with playoff implications here. First one's MCI Winslow. It's a rematch of one of the best playoff games from last year when MCI went to Winslow and won 43-42. Coach, you didn't play in Class C North with MCI, but you saw Winslow quite a few times.
We did.
Do you know anything about how you think this game could shake out? Or I know you're really busy working on your own league this year, but
well, and it's being a little bit. We haven't scrimmaged with Coach Bertrand and MCI in a couple of years now. We used to go to their football jamboree during the controlled scrimmage week, so we haven't really seen them. Haven't seen Winslow in a couple of years, because we're no longer in the Big 10, Big 11. But going on what I know, those are, again, the whole, they don't, really rebuild. They just seem to have athletes every year. They're always competitive, great tradition. Sounds like another, big smash mouth type of matchup, as usual.
Right. And a game I think you'll be covering on Saturday afternoon, Drew, is Mount Desert Island at Nokomis. Nokomis coming off a loss to Levitt, who is undefeated in a crossover game, but still one of the contenders in the North.
Yeah, and it's getting that date at home. It's a good chance to get what will definitely be a big win if they were able to get it for that standing and for that division and everything going forward in the postseason. So that feels like it's going to be a pretty down to the wire game. And you've seen Nokomis. You've seen Nokomis for the season. What stood out about what they bring to the table?
They've got a diversity of players on offense. Alex Custodio at fullback can run the ball. They've got Chance Graves and Brock Graves catching the ball from Andrew Hanning. So they can do a few different things. Just maybe tighten up a few things on defense. Their losses, none of them have been really blowouts. They lost 8 points to Winslow and lost, I think, 25-7 to Herman, and then another 20-something to 7 game to Levitt. So they're right with these teams. They just haven't quite, gone over that hump. So this would be a game that they could build on for the remaining of the season.
You always wonder if teams like that have just been kind of snake bit a bit in some of the losses are just always on the verge of a game where they put it all together and it's a 30-7 win or something like that.
True.
So it'll be interesting to see just how on track Nokomis is able to get all aspects of their team.
Yeah, and this is still a team that's improving because, think of it a couple of years ago, we're not talking about Nokomis being on the verge of anything other than, another 0-8 season. They've really put it together, won 6 games and made the playoffs last year, a contender again this year, so things are going in the right direction for Nokomis. A game that you'll be interested in covering on Friday night is in Class C South, Cape Elizabeth at Gardner.
Rematch of last year's regional final, and Cape Elizabeth is you look at the standings, and they're not the Cape Elizabeth from last year. 2-3. They played some good teams, but 2-3 is 2-3. But Gardner is starting to kind of look less like maybe that team that's kind of in that Levitt category that we were talking about at the beginning of the year, and maybe that they're that team that hits and misses. They've had some really impressive games, but they've had some bad losses to Freiburg and York. Not that Freiburg's a bad loss because of the opponent, they just weren't competitive in that game. So, and even if Cape Elizabeth is kind of down this year, sometimes you look at those games, it's not so much beating the team as much as beating the program. It's still beating a good coach in Aaron Filio. It's beating a team that always seems to know what it's doing. So if Gardner's able to go to that's a home game. So if Gardner's able to defend their home field and get a win like that, you got to think that that's going to be one that the Tigers, Coach Joe White, who knows Aaron Filio personally, that they'll be feeling pretty good about going forward.
Definitely. A game in Class D North in the Little 10 Conference that has some playoff implications is Ellsworth at Mount View. Both teams are 3-3, but Mount View's 3 wins have come against teams that are combined 1-14. So they need a win like this to get the heel points and get on a little more solid ground for the playoffs, in which only 6 teams make it. Coach, I'm sure it's something you don't really focus on, but heel points are always kind of in the back of the mind about getting into that positioning for the playoffs.
Yeah, they're there. Again, hopefully my players don't watch this stuff because you got to tell them a whole different thing. But yeah, you're always, we try to stay focused on the game in hand and getting game. But I always tell them, hey, I got to have one eye, on the future, and heel points are huge. We're looking at, if you talk about our 2C wins, how are those guys doing? Who are they knocking off potentially? Are they becoming more competitive? And I know in our class right now, it's going to come down to every heel point. I think it's going to be, when you talk about 3 through 8, I think it's going to come down to every single half a heel point that we can get. It just looks like it's going to unfold that type of way, So yeah, heel points are definitely huge.
Do you prefer the current system of using heel points to rank teams to the playoffs, or the old Crabtree point system where Crabtree points took your record and the combined record of all your opponents?
Yeah, that's a little bit of a double-edged sword. I mean, there are some differences there. You can make arguments good and bad both ways. I might lean a bit more toward I like the win percentage, the Crabtree type of stuff. But, I think it all balances out in the end. Try not to get too wrapped up in it. I just got done saying hill points are important, but, we try not to get into too much of the math. I know I've done that as a former baseball coach. You're going right now to the final week. Okay, what if Winthrop knocks off St. Dom's and this happens and a lot of scenarios. But I think, both systems, we all got to play under the same one. So I guess just go out and take care of business and you don't have to worry about it too
just
much,
get
right?
in.
Yeah, just win, baby, right?
And it's interesting you mentioned that about the Crabtree versus the heel points because Walter Polke, the Maranacook coach, was saying last week when they played Winthrop Monmouth, he's like, this game really doesn't do that much for us. I mean, it's not like we get those added points just from playing this team. And it was a game that Class C versus Class D, not a great chance of winning going in. So he was like, because I asked him, are there things you can take from this to kind of help you going forward? And he said, no, maybe in the preseason when there's, it's just taking things that you can apply for the rest of the season. But right now in the middle of the season, no, it doesn't really do that much. So. Just kind of a point in favor of the Crabtree.
Yeah, I've had a few coaches mention to me that they just feel like the heel point system, while it works in basketball and baseball and sports where they play more games, because there's only 8 games in football, it doesn't quite do the math that it's supposed to do. But with the crossover and cross-class games, I don't know what other way you could do it.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the rub right there with the crossover type stuff. But that is, I know with a lot of us, if you try to be, some try to be diplomatic and say, hey, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of another, but really with the Crabtree, with the heel points, that's the big point, is that it's not 16 games. It's not basketball and it's not baseball, where it does weigh a lot more heavily. Football's different. Like you said, I mean, that's probably the best way to put it, is that's where I think you're going to see the biggest difference in the two systems is the shorter schedule that we play.
Right. Quickly, a couple of games in there worth looking at in Class A. Scarborough and Thornton, battle of undefeated teams in Class A South. Bonnie Eagle, an undefeated Class A South team, playing a 1-loss Oxford Hills team from the north. So playoff positioning in the state's biggest class is at stake there.
Yeah, I bet you there are a lot of people who think, whether they're just fans or whether they're involved in the game, who would say that Scarborough or Thornton game could be could be a preview of the A South Regional Final, and maybe even you could be seeing the Class A state champion playing in this game. I mean,
we've had Scarborough and Thornton have been 1-2 in some order in our Main Today media poll all season, so this game might help shake that out a little bit. All right, that's going to do it for us this week. For Drew, for Coach Franzose, I'm Travis. Enjoy whatever football games you get out to this weekend, and we'll see you next time on Gridiron Gurus.